What's up, everybody? Welcome into MLB DFS Live for Friday, June 11th. I'm your host, Ben Hostler, joined by Justin Bales. Faked you guys out. I think the title says Rueb and Bales, but there's no Rueb today. It is me and Bales. So we are here to talk about tonight's huge baseball slate. If you guys have any questions, you can drop them in the chat. We will answer them. I think this is a pretty fun slate, Bales. You were just mentioning it before we fired the stream up here, but there's a lot of really good pitchers. There's a lot of good stacks. I think this is one of the more fun slates we've had in the last month or so. I think there's a lot of ways to go. So with that being said, we can go ahead and jump in here. We have a lot to cover. I do want to mention, if you head to dfskarma.com, you can check out all of our free content. I have the slate breakdown up for tonight's slate already. Bales will have free content on Bet Karma as well as DFS Karma. If you have any further questions after the stream, you can ask us in Discord, which you can enter for free. dfskarma.com. There's a banner at the top of the website to join. Starting here at pitcher, Bales, we have big names all over. Max Scherzer, Jacob deGrom, Brandon Woodruff, Clayton Kershaw. There's a lot going on here at the top end of pitcher today. My personal opinion is anytime deGrom is on the slate, I will just play him. I think you're in the same agreement there. But I think, Max was going to be really chalky last night in this same matchup. Now, tonight, the ownership will be lower just because there's more options around him. I think it's still a good matchup for him, but San Fran does have some lefty power, which obviously is the one concern with him. And I think Woodruff has a really good matchup against Pittsburgh. They're bottom 4 in WOBA versus right-handed pitching. They have the lowest combined ISO against right-handed pitching. So I think actually how I would rank these guys is number 1, deGrom, number 2, Woodruff, and then you have Kershaw and Max 3 and 4. So I'd probably go deGrom, Woodruff, Scherzer, and then Kershaw. I think if I was ranking those top 4 personally.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. I would say that deGrom and Woodruff are 1 and 2, and then I think that Kershaw and Scherzer are very close. I think you can also throw Lucas Giolito in there just because I really like the matchup. To be 100% honest, it's not like you're going to really talk, or I wouldn't really try to talk you off of Blake Snell, Sandy Alcantara. I think that both of them are very good arms. I tweeted out this morning that there's 10 plus guys that I would be 100% comfortable playing at pitcher tonight for the price tags. And realistically, any of like the top 7, probably all the way down to not including Urquidy, I think that all of them are just really good options in the matchups and for the price tags tonight.
Yeah, Giolito, obviously great matchup against Detroit. I think I definitely above Kershaw. It's probably him and Max for number 3, right? I think most people will probably side with Giolito because he's a little bit cheaper. So I think I guess if we include him and we're talking a big 5, then I would go deGrom, Woodruff, Giolito, Scherzer, Kershaw.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. I just really like Kershaw's matchup against Texas, honestly. So I go back and forth there, but I think that I agree. I would probably say that my big 5 are the same. I just don't really think that, there's that much of a difference between like 5 and 3. I just think that deGrom is clear cut the number 1 for me until he stops throwing just at this absurd rate. I'm not going to stop playing him. And then I do think that Woodruff, just because he's not nearly as expensive as a guy like Scherzer 5, you can kind of mix them up the way that you want, and I wouldn't really have any problems with it.
No, yeah, I mean, that just speaks to how loaded this slate is, right? Saying Kershaw's 5th on this slate, that's not like that doesn't mean he's a bad play. I think for tournaments, he's going to be really low owned. So if you're making a bunch of lineups or if you're primarily a tournament player and you like him, play him. I don't think any of these guys at the top are really bad today. So I think truly you should go with your gut today. And, if you do your own research, whoever you end up liking the most, I think that is who you should go with because there's just a ton of good options today.
Yep, I 100% agree. I think below them, there's plenty of options as well. We get down to, like I don't know if I want to play Blake Snell, but he is coming off basically a 40 fantasy point performance against New York. They're a little bit healthier now, so I would drop it down a little bit. Alcantara is 100% fine against Atlanta, who strikes out a ton. Um, I mean, we have Otani, who's finally above 8,000, and it still just feels like a ridiculous price tag, right?
Yeah, so we can go ahead and move off of the 10K guys there. Um, yeah, you nailed it. Snell 9,400 I think is certainly in play. Shohei Ohtani at 8,100 I think is in play. Charlie Morton at 7,500 I think maybe people will look at him as well. So there's a lot of guys in the mid tier as well. My favorite is Ohtani. I was overweight on him in his last start. He looked really good. I don't know if you watched it, but his velocity was up in that start. So I think he's kind of just getting stronger and getting more comfortable the more he pitches this season. Typically in the past we've seen his velocity decrease the more he's pitched, but it actually was up the highest it's been all season at last start. So I think he's getting a little bit more comfortable. Obviously, his splitter is untouchable. It's basically the best pitch in baseball. The Diamondbacks don't strike out a ton as a team, around 21, 22%, but they also don't walk a lot. So I think the matchup's good. And I think he's just too cheap for the strikeout potential that he has. So I think he's my favorite mid-tier option. I would prefer him to Snell just because I think they're similar pitchers and one is significantly cheaper than the other one. So I'm just going to focus on Ohtani in that mid tier, but you could definitely make a case for a lot of those guys as well.
Yeah, I think if I'm choosing between Otani and Snell, I would choose Otani just because, you get a much cheaper pitcher and they're very similar, like you said. My problem is right around Otani, and I know that you love him. I also love him. I think he's a great play. No problems whatsoever, but I feel like a lot of people generally feel that way. The pitcher above him, Aaron Saval, I think is just in a fantastic matchup. I don't think he necessarily has the upside of Otani, but the matchup against Seattle it's just so good at the moment. And then if you go one below him, Tyler Mahle, I actually do think is a really good pitcher who does have similar upside because of his strikeout ability. And obviously, anytime you play Colorado when they're on the road, it's just a great matchup. So there's a lot of really good options, and we didn't really drop down yet to the cheap plays. And oddly enough, there are a few that I feel like you can take tonight.
Yeah, I noted Mahle as a GPP play in the breakdown. I do think he is in a good spot. You could talk me into him. Savali, I'm just not a fan of his. Matchup's certainly good against Seattle. They're just terrible, but they are going to send a lot of lefties out, and Savali does give up some power to lefties. Not that the Mariners have overwhelming power, but they do have guys like Seager that have some pop. So I would probably cross him off my list personally. Mahle, I do like. I think that's a good play. What cheaper guys are you interested in? I don't know if you're talking really cheap. I think Keegan Aiken actually is in play. He's 5K on DraftKings.
Yeah, I mean, you get the lefty who's actually looked relatively better in his last few starts against Tampa Bay. I wouldn't tell you no. I think he's relatively fine. I think if you're going up a little bit more, Charlie Morton at 7,500, the price tag's pretty ridiculous, especially for the matchup. I think Cole Irvin at 66 against Kansas City is slightly interesting. I'm not like a huge Irvin guy, but I do think that the matchup is okay enough for you to take your shot in tournaments. And then yesterday, I said that Anthony DeSclafani was relatively fine against Washington. I still feel that way, but I don't think you have to go there anymore. Yesterday, I feel like he was a better play because there was only 6 games, and then obviously it got postponed. Tonight, I don't necessarily think you have to go there, but I do think if you're running a bunch of teams in tournaments, he's a guy that you can put in for a couple teams. I'm fine with Keegan Aiken too. I think that he's relatively okay just because of the price tag, but it's just so hard to trust someone like him.
Yeah, definitely not a cash game play on a big slate like this with all these pitchers. But I think for tournaments, if you really want to jam in some expensive stacks, you could look at him as an SB2. Morton, I think Morton's going to be like decently owned. So I think I like Mahle a little bit more than him, but the matchup is good, and I still think Charlie Morton's a decent pitcher. So I don't hate it, but there's just too many. I don't know. I've leaned more towards spending up on pitching this season than not. And with all these guys, I feel like I would rather just find some cheaper bats and get two of the expensive guys in than play someone like Morton. But that's just my own personal opinion today.
No, I agree with you. I keep going back and forth on what stacks I really want to use because there's some that I like that are so difficult to get too high end pitchers, but I don't know. I feel like there's enough options that you can probably make basically any stack work.
Yep, I agree. I think we covered pitcher pretty well. I think I'm going to be spending up. Like, I'm going to play Otani most likely on DraftKings, but I would try and get Otani or two guys above him in like a main lineup. Tournaments you can do, whatever you want, especially if you're playing a lot of teams. But if you guys have questions on pitchers we didn't mention, you can ask in chat. We'll get into the positional plays here. We'll talk stacks at the end. At catcher, I mean, I'm going to need to save at catcher, right? Some slates this season we've had money to spend up, but with these pitchers today, I'm going to have to find some savings. I think Tyler Stevenson is going to be a popular one at 3,900. Batting cleanup for the Reds against Freeland. He hits the ball really hard. He's looked really good, and they've kept him in that cleanup spot. So I think at 3,900, people will be looking at him against the lefty. I like Max Stassi still. He's just been hitting the ball really hard. If he stays in the lineup, I mean, even if you look at the game log, it looks really good. But as long as he's in the lineup for the Angels at 3,100, I think he's in play as well.
Agree. I think who was that? Sorry, I think you cut out.
No, I just mentioned Stevenson and Max Stassi.
Okay. I think we can add just for cheap guys, Ryan Jeffers, assuming he's in the lineup. Assuming he hits relatively high too. 2,500, I think that's too cheap. If you want to drop down, honestly, like Reese McGuire is 2,300, gets a matchup in Boston against Garrett Richards. I have no issues whatsoever really with that. I think if you want like Pedro Severino, 2,200, I think that's just a little too cheap, especially if he's hitting slightly higher in the Baltimore order because he gets a lefty. I think they're all good plays, but I feel like the standout guy is obviously Tyler Stevenson, and then I do believe just because of the matchup, you can play either of the White Sox guys.
Yeah, my boy Scooble's turned around, man. I'm actually pretty excited. He's looked really good the last like month, really. Still will give up power though, so you definitely. I don't know if I would. I think you need to play it. Just you can look for like some one-offs because he will give up a home run. Or just go for the full stack in hopes that he blows up. But yeah, certainly could look at either of those guys. I like Perez as well. I know you mentioned Urban, but I think he's always in play against a lefty if you have the money to get to him. First base, tons of good spend up options here, right? Like you could tack me into Vlad Jr. pretty much every slate, no problems with that. Max Muncy against Fulte, I think certainly is in play. But my favorite option is Jared Walsh for his price once again. And then for cheap, I like Bobby Dahlbeck. Typically, we look at Dahlbeck against a lefty, but Stripling actually has allowed a higher ISO to righties than lefties the last 2 seasons. Dahlbeck looks due for a little bit of regression, and he's just so cheap, right? Like the Red Sox are one of the top team stacks today, and you're getting exposure to their lineup for just 2,100 on a slate where we have all these pitchers. So I might just side with him for the savings.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good play just because the price tag's pretty ridiculous at this point, but it kind of is what it is. I think Yuli Gurriel makes a lot of sense if you want to save down a little bit more. Dan Vogelbach is a good play. I think either of the Cleveland guys, Josh Naylor or Bobby Bradley, can be used just because I do like the matchup. Obviously, Jose Abreu. I don't know. I feel like anytime the White Sox play lefties, even if School has been throwing better, you can kind of just use anyone on their team just because they're so good against lefties. But I don't know. Also, Mitch Moreland, he's 3,400. It's just a little too cheap. Not that I really love him or anything. And there are other guys that I would prefer to play, but I do think that that's a bit too cheap for him.
Yeah, I agree. Second base, definitely like Altuve as the top play there. I don't know. The Astros, we'll talk about stacks at the end, but the Astros are clearly the best stack today, in my opinion. So I think Altuve is like a priority spend up for me. If you don't have that money, I like Jonathan India again for cheap. And there's a couple other guys. Like you could go all the way down to Shed Long for a punt, I think, if you need it. But I think India is like the top mid-tier play. You have Ozzy Albies right there as well. He's only 4,300. Alcantara is a good pitcher, but I mean, Ozzy Albies a good hitter. He's only 4,300 on DraftKings. So there's some decent mid-tier options, but I think I'm going to be focusing and trying to get to Altuve at second today.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I think you can add in terms of salary relief, the two Milwaukee guys. Urias is 37. Peterson, assuming he's hitting sixth, is 26. I think that's just a little too cheap for both of them. So I do think that either of those two are good options if you need to drop down a little bit more as well.
Yeah, just tons of options today. Third base, I'll let you lead off here too, because I've kind of been taking the lead here.
I mean, it's so obvious to say, but I think that the top guy is Alex Bregman. I also believe that you could play Jose Ramirez. Josh Donaldson is relatively fine. Justin Turner, I think they're all good plays. If you want Devers at 56, I just prefer Bregman to him for 100 cheaper. Yoan Moncada, I mean, it's a lot of plays. Eugenio Suarez, and none of them are really overly cheap. I guess if you wanted like a cheaper option, like Yandy Diaz is hitting second, I have no problems really going there. But I don't know. There's so many high-priced options at third base that I can't imagine that this is going to be a position that you opt to save it.
I actually might be saving here. I like Kyle Seager at 3,500. 50% hard hits, 50% fly balls against righties for the season. If you look at the last 14 days, same marks, over 50% fly balls and hard hits. Savali, strike thrower. I mean, he gives up power to lefties. Seager's looked really good for the majority of the season. Obviously, the lineup is terrible. But if you're just one-offing looking for power, I think you can look at Seager. And the Indians' bullpen has been really bad the last couple days. So he could get a good matchup there. So he's probably my favorite cheap option. But yeah, I think Bregman is probably the top spend up for sure if you're going to spend up.
Yeah, I like Seager. Seager's generally on my radar, especially when he plays right-handed pitching. It's just, I don't know. There's so many guys that are really good options at this position that it's so hard for me to be like, oh, this is where I'll spend down.
Yeah, there's just a ton of options on a big slate. You can make a case for a lot of guys, and I mean, we didn't even mention some of the guys. I mean, like, it's tough. Like, even if you want to break it down to just talking about Bregman versus someone like Devers, it's really, really tough to decide between those two, given their matchups. But decisions to make on this slate for sure. Shortstop, I don't know where you're going here. I think for me, like, I really want to stack Houston. It's not going to be a secret to stack the Astros today, right? Like, they're clearly the top spot. They have over a 6 implied run total, but I think, at least in my early builds, how I was breaking it down, I was really trying to get their outfielders in and then Correa and Altuve, mainly because I feel pretty confident in Seager at third base. Correa's looked really good, hitting the ball hard. I obviously like the matchup, so I think he's probably my top overall spend up at shortstop. There's some decent mid-tier options here as well, though. So if you're not going to play Carlos Correa, where would you be looking at shortstop today?
I think Ahmed Rosario is interesting. Jorge Polanco is a bit too cheap yet. Yeah, I think you can spend up on other guys. Like Bo Bichette's underpriced anytime he's under 5K. I still think Tim Anderson's a little too cheap at 51. Even Xander Bogaerts in the matchup at 54. If you're dropping down even more, I actually kind of like Kyle Farmer, which generally I don't really play one-offs that hit late in the lineup, and he's hitting 8th. But I do think that Cincinnati's going to score a lot of runs today. I don't like Kyle Freeland at all. And Farmer's only 3,000. Outside of that, I mean, I think there's a few guys you can go, like Gavin Lux, I think is a little underpriced for the matchup. Willie Adames at 41. He's been absolutely raking the ball. I have no problems there. If you want to continue the lefties against Savale, we have J.P. Crawford, who's obviously been playing really well. So I do think there's a lot of options. I just agree with you that Carlos Correa is the top guy.
Yeah, certainly a lot of guys. The Blue Jays in particular, I think, are interesting because I think most people will be on the Red Sox side of that game against Stripling. So I do think that's a good call. We'll finish up here at outfield. Obviously, tons of options at outfield on a big slate like this. I think priorities for me here are Kyle Tucker, Yordan Alvarez, both way underpriced for this matchup. They get Shoemaker. They get the bad Twins bullpen. It's hot there. The wind's blowing out. I mean, it's just like all the stars are aligning for the Astros. I know they're going to be chalky, but it's chalk that I feel pretty good about. So those two guys I think are priorities for me. Nick Castellanos is going to be no secret again tonight as well. 4,800 against a lefty, but it's just too cheap. So I like those savings. I think Christian Yelich, if you're spending up, will be a higher owned option as well in terms of spend ups. So those are probably some of my favorite plays. You can give some of your favorite plays as well, and then we can talk about maybe some value or some one-offs here.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much nailed them all. I think I would add like Alex Verdugo. I think he's a really good option. Michael Brantley, he's only 3,800, so he's also way too cheap. If you're spending up, I have no problems with Mookie Betts or JD Martinez in either of those matchups. I mean, yeah, it's kind of just like the Houston guys and Nick Castellanos, though.
Yeah, guys like Trevor Larnach are still really cheap on the Twins side.
Yep.
And they also get the weather boost, obviously, in the same game. So you could look at him for cheap. And some other guys if you're filling out your stacks as well. But I think we covered it pretty well. If you guys have questions, go ahead and drop those in. Bales, this is a tough slate to pick a home run call, but I'm going to ask you nonetheless, what is your home run call for tonight?
Okay, so I made a home run call yesterday, and the game got canceled. I'm just going to redo that home run call, which now that there's 13 games instead of 6, it seems even dumber than it was yesterday. But I'm going to hold strong on Brandon Crawford.
No, I didn't catch the stream yesterday, but as soon as you said that you made it yesterday, I kind of assumed it was going to be Brandon Crawford because I know you love him. But I actually think that's a good call. I mean, Scherzer will give up a home run every start, it feels like, to a lefty. It's no secret. Crawford's been hitting the ball really well.
Crawford's got the power.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. And if you're not playing Max Scherzer in your lineup, just taking a one-off of Crawford, makes a ton of sense.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I think you could do like the same with like Brandon Belt too, honestly, if you wanted.
Yeah, that's something I've talked to Sam about this before, but that's something I don't do enough of in MLB is if I'm not playing a pitcher that's going to have some ownership, like not playing the one-off against him or whatever is something that I don't do enough of. So that does make complete sense to me. I'm going to go with Kyle Seager. So we have all these guys on the slate, and we're going with like the cheaper shortstop and third base. But I'm gonna go with Kyle Seager on this slate. Very likely that he's in my my core plays tonight. So I'm gonna get the good vibes flowing for that one right there.
I like it. I think that's a good call. I think it's good.
All right, thank you guys for watching. Like I said at the top of this, if you guys have any questions, hit us up in Discord. You can get in for free, dfskarma.com. There's a banner at the top of the website. And if you want access to our core plays, we've had a ton of success this season, and it's not going to stop here throughout the summer. dfskarma.com/MLB. You get Bales core plays, my core plays, Rueb, Anthony on the bigger slates will post his, Sriracha, everybody, all of our analysts up on the website every day for every main slate. But that about does it. Thank you guys for watching. Good luck tonight, and hopefully you guys are in the green after luck.
Oh wait, yo, timeout.
All right, timeout.
Someone asked for our favorite stacks. We didn't go.
Last minute question. Oh yeah, we did. I guess we didn't talk about stacks.
We didn't go.
Yeah, I'm used to doing it at the top of the before we head into positional plays. But all right. So Astros far and away number 1. I think Red Sox are far and away number 2, and then after that, it's kind of the strategy I've taken on these bigger slates, at least the last couple weeks, is I haven't really been full stacking as much on these bigger slates. I've been looking more at like 2 and 3-man stacks and finding a bunch of those. So I think outside of Houston and Boston, I would be looking at more mini stacks than anything. But what are your top stacks outside of Houston and Boston, which I think are the obvious ones?
Yeah, I mean, Houston is head and shoulders above everyone else, in my opinion, tonight. I think they're so crazy that I'm like considering stacking them in tournaments, even though they're going to be chalky, and just try to win elsewhere. But I really like Cincinnati. I think that they're in a really good spot, especially in that small ballpark. I think Cleveland is relatively okay. I agree Boston's really good. I have no issues whatsoever with the Dodgers. And then a stack that I feel like will probably go a bit overlooked that I feel like they're in a really good spot is the Milwaukee Brewers.
Yeah, Brewers are a good cheap one. I think Seattle's a great cheap one if you're just going to take their lefties to fit in some expensive pitching. I like that tonight. Dodgers for sure are always in play. That would be Dodgers might be third for me behind the big two just because of how good they are. But yeah, tons of ways to go on this slate. Um, yeah, I think that pretty much does it. Now that we covered stacks, I gotta get a new background here so we can put a little stacks button over there next to the position so I don't forget. But thank you guys for watching. Good luck tonight, and we'll see you guys on Monday.